Ever wondered what it would be like to wander the surface of Mars in solitude? Well, here's your chance. Graphics. When it comes to the graphics of Lacuna Passage, they're mediocre. It's not a bad looking game per se, but it certainly isn't a good looking game either. There really isn't anything visually interesting to see, just large stretches of open space and rocks. Lots of rocks. What I do like about the presentation, however, is the atmosphere. It feels lonely, desolate and secluded. It really has that one lonely soul on a gigantic planet feeling, and as such can feel quite immersive. Gameplay. Let me start off by saying that this game is, as you might expect, very slow paced. In this very early release state, I'd say this game is more like a Martian walking simulator rather than a full game. When you start playing, you wake up from a crashed pod in a completely randomized landscape, and your immediate goal is to find an outpost in which you can set up base. When you first arrive at this outpost, you'll find it is offline and needs to be powered on. Doing so requires you to check out the machinery around the base and to fix them, like replacing broken fuses or circuit boards. There's a bunch of different equipment that regulates electricity and oxygen, among other things. All these machines wear down their components over time, so they require the occasional maintenance by repairing them. Opening maintenance cabinets to fix certain parts manually adds a sense of realism to the whole thing. Now, the loot itself is nothing short of overwhelming, to say the least. There seems to be a crazy amount of items, some of which with really obscure functionality. There must be 20 different types of food alone, all with different nutritional values. All items, aside from food and water, are useful in one way or another by powering certain devices or to be used as salvage to extract items used in the crafting of others. Unfortunately, right now, the crafting and salvaging does seem to be pretty bare bones, and worse yet, not really all that important, and currently it seems quite optional. The landscape of Mars itself is scattered with waypoint stations and remote outposts. Unfortunately, many objects around the world serve as nothing more than a loot container. After nearly dying due to a lack of food, which is a real problem in this game since you can't eat outside of your base, I finally stumbled upon some sort of vehicle. Hoping to just being able to simply hop onto this drill rover to speed back to the base for some tasty snacks, the drill rover turned out to have no other use than being a loot container, so that night was the end of my story. Which kind of brings me to the survival elements in this game. It's the tried and true formula of racing against the clock to keep food and water at acceptable levels, yet encumbered somewhat with the limited movement imposed on you. You're on Mars in a clumsy EVA suit that runs on battery power and, of course, oxygen. Now, the biggest problem I found is that you cannot really use any food or drink when you're outside of your base. So what all this does is really limit your exploration options, because you constantly have to be aware of the distance from your base, the amount of oxygen and battery power left in your suit, and of course your own food and water levels. The survival is made even more difficult with a rather unclear map and absolutely no possible clue or indication of where other outposts can be found, aside from walking everywhere with the scanner active. This resulted in me having a few absolutely hopeless treks across the Martian landscape in search of new outposts, which inevitably led to my death. Now, since the game only allows saving when actually resting inside your base, this made for some trial and error kind of gameplay, yet not really the fun kind. I must admit, I haven't played a crazy amount of hours yet, so I might have missed something like a working vehicle or something, but I highly doubt it at this point. Currently, the biggest issue I have with this game in the current stage of development is that there's no goal. There's no story mode yet, and the sandbox mode seems pretty barren with very little to do aside from trying to explore the whole map in search of everything there is to find. Right now, it's just not fun. Overall score: the good. Good musical score. Very nice, fitting, spacey soundtrack that ramps up the immersion, especially at night. Atmosphere. Setting, music and visuals create a unique experience. Realism. Despite taking place on another planet, the game does feel somewhat realistic with its portrayal of things like your vitals and the overall limitations imposed on you. The bad. Tedious menu navigation. Like, really, Getting around in the menu with the arrow keys and looting each item individually is tedious right now. A loot all option is definitely needed. Early access lacks too many interesting gameplay features as of yet. Unimpressive visuals. Unsatisfying crafting. Boring. Closing words. Despite the game being pretty barren right now, I still had a few hours of fun roaming around the landscape, figuring out the game. I like how it tries the survival genre with a different approach than most survival games, a more methodical, realistic approach. Downside to this is that right now it leans too heavily on the not so fun gameplay part of the realism rather than the fun part. This game has potential, however, and I can see it become quite a unique experience once the story mode is implemented and the sandbox mode is more developed. Is it worth it? As of yet, no, not really. Overall, the game is a bit on the boring side right now, unless you're really into the setting, I guess. I'd recommend to give it some more time to develop and possibly look into it when the story mode is ready or even when the sandbox mode is more completed. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. My name is SirDutchie and I wish you, as usual, a fantastic spacey day.